shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme no more yielding but a dream, gentles do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend.
This is Byrne Power, and today what we're going to do is the second part of my very long interview sessions with Polish puppet historian Henryk Jurkowski. In the first of our 2 days worth of discussions with him, we discussed parts of his own biography in relationship to puppetry, but also we discussed Polish puppetry and a little bit of the definition of what puppetry is, which we will continue with in this part. In this episode, what we're going to also do is we are going to discuss the history of puppetry, various aspects of puppet history as it pertains to European puppetry, although other parts of the world are certainly mentioned. And I hope you find this interesting. It's longer than the first session, but equally fascinating. I'm sure you'll find out. Okay. The subject is, we'll start off with the most difficult question of all.
Oh, really?
What is a puppet?
What is a puppet?
Yes.
This is the question.
We'll start with that.
Oh, well, we have already discussed it in some measure, you know. It's Puppet for me, it is a simulacrum. It means, we talked yesterday about it, that it's just a reproduction of live being, you know, not necessarily human being, but live being, and there are plenty of them, starting from the small idols and different kind of toys to the such things like androids, robots, and so on. And puppet is between all of them, and I I think that puppet is specially chosen among all simulacra as a item which is in the close possession of human being. This point is very, very important, that you know, automata, they are moved by some mechanism, and we may be at distance. Sculpture, we are looking for the distance, from the distance. The same with the different kind of anthropologic, you know, items like idols and so on. But puppets, we needed it to have close to us. One thing, it is a puppet children have, like girls, for example, they have the small puppet to imitate a child and so on. But we wanted to, we wanted to have some simulacrum close to us. We are dominating, just directly dominating. Sometimes we are dominating it for ourselves, for our pleasure. Sometimes we would like to influence the other people, you know, and that's why the production, the show, the performance I think that all this relationship with simulacra were coming to one point, which was the theater, and besides there was the example of the theater, the use of the mask, for example, and the use of the puppet and idols by shaman, for example. So from all this cultural situation, the puppet theater developed. But you asked especially about the puppet. Well, puppet is an object, an item similar to human being, which worked in the hands of shaman, helping him in his magical action. I believe in that the puppet theater was born, the actor drama was born from the ritual, but puppet theater was born from the ritual and magic action, you know. And so puppet is a special object, and its status is to be in between life and between not life, and it is attractive to us because we are touching the just playing with puppet. I believe we are touching the secret of life. This is what is so fascinating in human culture, that we wanted to know where we are from, what was the origin of our life. And here we have the, let us say, model situation that we may try to imagine, and we may try this situation, how it is coming from the dead matter toward the life matter. This is the model situation. It's an experimental room, I would say, and that's why it is so attractive. I think like that.
So to follow this line of thinking, I want to get back to some others related to dolls and toys, but to follow this line of thinking, what is it? Is it in the matter, do you think? Or is it in our ability to make the matter live, or are we showing something which is already there? How do you think that works with the animation of the is the matter empty, dead, the material, or are we bringing something to it from outside?
Yes. So the thing is that we are bringing something from outside. We are bringing our energy and our belief, because it's very important. Energy and belief. We are coming to the puppet, we are moving the puppet, but puppet won't be alive until we believe in its life. So these two elements are very important. But when the puppet already was given this energy, once was given the energy, it's never that object, because we have invested already, there is a big, we have an invested life. There is a big difference between the puppet made for selling, punch made for selling, and the punch just used in the theater. There is a big difference. There is a big quality. A big difference in quality. I remember once that I was in India and I saw the Rajasthani theater, and I wanted some puppets to buy, naturally. And they brought me the puppet manufactured specially for visitors, and I said, no, nothing like that. I want this one from the stage, and they accepted it. They did understand that it has a special special quality. Once the puppet was on the stage or on the screen, you know, it's something something else, something new, because there is already this investment of our soul, let us say, of our spirit, of our energy. So it isn't the theatrical puppet isn't really the that thing, and of course there is a problem how to treat the puppet. I remember the situation in the Polish puppet theater, where after the show the puppet were thrown away like something not necessary anymore, and there was a big fight among the puppeteers. Treat it in different way. You can't do it like that. This is a precious thing, and it is just not to imagine. It is besides the imagination of traditional puppet player. Traditional puppet player has known that the puppet was a different thing, was alive, and very often the traditional puppeteer used to say, "Oh, my Guignol is alive." During my performance, I feel that I'm not playing; he's playing by himself, you know. And this is something, some spiritual secret, you know, that well, it's that matter, but not that matter. That there is alive within it, but it is alive within it only for those people who are apt to believe in it, you know. So believe, it's important.
Well, it seems somewhat analogous to the concept of Spirit of God breathing into dust. You know, it seems like there's some sort of analogy there. That
yes.
Because of course the most mysterious thing for us is, why are we conscious of so much in the world where rocks and even trees don't seem to be that conscious, and animals barely conscious, you know. And so the puppet seems to be in some way, it's like a set of metaphors, but it's more than a metaphor.
Oh, metaphor, puppet as a metaphor. Metaphor can be existing if you have two elements, you know. So in puppet you have element of visuality, visual element, and the other element, it is energy, it's life put together. You must put together both things to have this metaphor, metaphor of life, metaphor, more better metaphor of life than metaphor of human.
Yes, I understand. So following that line of thought, the puppet and its relationship to the idol, the fetish object, the religious icon. It seems there is a point, though, at some point, at which, in history, it loses that sense of participation, direct participation, and becomes what we would call the theatrical being, object, creation. What do you think about that process? How do you think that happened? How did it change its meaning?
Well, you know, there's always this wish to protect, to assure our belief. For example, you have had this old figure of God, anti-God, you know. They are figures, they remain in the museums. But even the primary people, primary culture, people wanted to have this God moving. And we have some evidences telling, for example, of the cases when the magnet was used to move the figures. It was unusually clever at that time. It was the Greek Pausanias, he was a geographer of the old time, who wrote about such a situation. There was a cave. In the cave was a kind of a temple, and there was the god made of magnet, yes, like in compass. Made of magnet rock, and there was also some construction of magnetism which moved on the roof, and the god could fly, you know. It was very sophisticated, you know, very, very clever, just to make the figure of such size that this could move on the basis of magnet force, you know, from one place to another. This was a big temptation. This was a big temptation for the people, for the clergy, for the priest in all culture. It was the same in the Christian tradition. Even today we have the collection in the museum, in the church museum. We have the collection of the Jesus Christ, which could move his arm, could move the head, and there was a system to make blood run from his injured side, and so on. And there was many different way to introduce movement to the church sculpture. For example, there was Madonnas, very beautiful Madonnas, which were opened. There was the figure, and the figure was opened, and inside you had this set of picture, you know. It was just the display of a story, you know, by the use of the movement. Open the figure of course was not moving, but just by opening and showing the story, the set of picture, it was a way of bringing some new element to move your imagination, you know, because it's always like that we have the stimuli, and we have the response. We spectator, we are giving the response to the images which are shown to us. And they are shown to us in different way. This open Madonna was presenting us the picture. We had, I have mentioned yesterday, the altar, the open altar. It's like a box. It may be open with a set of picture. It was this retablo. And if you remember, the first puppet theater in Spain was called Repertoire. If you read carefully the Cervantes story about the show presented by showman Peter, so there is he is bringing on in front of the spectators the retable scene. So this is this stage of going from the statue, from the different figures to the puppet theater. And in Middle Ages, this moving figure were very, very popular. At the time of religious revolution in the Henry IV, you know, in England. There was a big attack of the new church on the old church, and in this fight we have the evidences on it. There were discovered the figure, different kind of figure, magical figure, which were serving to convince the believer that the church figure are alive, saint figure, Jesus Christ figure, and so on. So this was the beginning of puppetry, and just taking it and to apply it to the profane theater was very easy, and I think that in the old time, even in the Middle Ages, some poor people who had the wandering life, you know, they used this small figure as entertainment. There was no other way, and well, this was it. And finally, as I said before a while, there was a actor theater, acting demonstration, and this was an example how to use the figure.
So it leads me to a different line of thinking, and this goes back again to the origin of puppets.
Yeah.
And it seems that one of the other theories I've heard is the relationship between the puppet and the doll. The doll being, or the toy, being the natural, one could say any child who picks up a stick that kind of looks like a horse will start making it look like a horse. It gives it a life that's based on its imagination, probably not with so much religious emphasis at all. And yet, if you follow that line, I know that some of the early puppet or doll, we're not sure if some of the early things that we have from, say, the Roman era or further back are puppets or dolls. It's kind of hard to say because you don't know. One theory I've heard is that the difference between a toy or a doll and a puppet is, if you're playing it with yourself, it's a doll. If you turn it around and play it for someone else, it's a puppet. Well, you can comment on that, but the thing that strikes me is so that there's a whole line of maybe these two things come together, or maybe there's a whole line of thinking of, you know, it seems like something like Roman puppet theater or Punch comes out of a very different kind of element. There's an element of brutality, an element of play. There's the profane side. Maybe you can comment on those kinds of...
Yes, well, if you think about the human life, so you have a childhood, you have the time of the youth, you are a youngster, and you are adult, and you are old man, and we can apply this division to the existence of humanity. There was a time when humanity was in the period of their childhood. And then it came the next stages and so on. And at the time of childhood of humanity, I don't believe that there was any division on the children toy and adult toy. Very long time. Still the 18th century, the notion of childhood didn't exist. The adult people use the same toys as children, or vice versa. Children use the same toys and they participate in the same play as adult people. So childhood is a very late notion. And of course I can believe that some rich families in Roman epoch, they had some some special toys for children. But puppetry and puppet was many century before, you know, and I am believing that the puppetry was born just at the time of the childhood of humanity, and later came the playing with toys by children. Toys are deform images of the idols, according to my belief. If I'm not sure if that, I'm clear. I would like to say that idols could be transformed into the instrument of the theater, as well as into instrument to satisfy the children imagination, you know. And so I don't believe that the children toys are the origin of puppetry. Nothing like that. It was many century before children used their toys. When human has invented the idol, the sacred figure, and step by step used the puppet for the entertainment or the religious purposes. In Egypt, in the religious ceremony, very often they use the figure of the artificial god. And we can't say that these artificial gods were a kind of toy transformation. Nothing like that. It must be other way around, you know, just from idol to the toy and not from the toy to the idol. It's my conviction, and I think that if necessary I can bring you a lot of evidence on it.
So what's your feeling about the difference between the different simulacra? We have the things ranging from the doll to the robot or the android. How do you think? How would you describe? We've talked about this before, but what would your definition be of, for instance, what are these things? What's a doll? What's a toy? What's a robot? How would you define them versus what's a puppet? Or can any of them be used as a puppet, automaton, whatever, in a certain situation? In other words, does a puppet have to be animal, humanoid figure, or can, this gets us into the territory of objects and such.
Yes. Well, so puppet is a simulacrum which is made nowadays and have been made in all time for the use in the theater, for the use in the show, in the visual entertainment. Well, like the fair puppetry, like Punch and Judy, like the Henson puppet, they are specially constructed for the use in the theater. They are puppets. And dolls are the objects which are used for children. And there are different kinds of dolls. There are dolls which are not movable, and there are toys which are mechanized. For example, the train is moving, and some vehicles are moving, and so on. So there are toys, dolls, toys. They are specially made for children. The purpose is very important. objective why it was done. Idol was done for religious celebration, let us say, and robot, it's another thing, because the object and the purpose of a robot is very often practical. We have the machine which are called robots. They are not humanoid, but they are sort of robot. Just we have Android. It's a humanoid form of robot, and they are made. The purpose was to show the engineering ability of human being. You know, it is very, very ambitious already. It is a special task. Let us make something special, something similar. It is a modern golem. We haven't mentioned yet golem, but it was golem. It's this symbol of this trying to create the artificial human being, to repeat the God action. Yeah, and it was the Kabbalah Rebbe who wanted to have this golem, and of course there is this story was very well known, but engineers, contemporary engineers, are going the same to the same purpose in different way, engineering way, and they have got some excellent result, and some robots are already used in the theater. For example, in Japan you have the Android robotic theater spectacle, something very very special. So the puppet was made specially for the theater, but nowadays, according to the development of theatrical skill of the people who are involved in puppetry, you can use the other object also in the function of the puppet. You can use any object. You can use any thing, any doll or toy, and invest life in it. Invest. The difference is that into the puppet you invest the energy from, let us say, inside. Let us put it like that. From inside, in the way, hidden way, you know. In the object you are investing in the everyday practical object, or the toy or the doll, you are investing your energy from outside, in the visible way. It's another stage of the acting in the object theater than in the puppet theater. But you can do it. But object is object, has another purpose. Was done with another purpose. And this is the thing which, this is the point where the things are differentiate. Just the purpose of their existence.
Are we creating a new grammar of puppetry that's been different than?
Well, as a matter of fact, I am a traditionalist. And I'm traditionalist as a linguist. So it means that I would like to differentiate and to see the difference between the object and everyday used object and the puppet. something which is made for the theater. I would like to see this difference, and that's why I am for using the old terminology, the object theater and puppet theater. I don't like when all means of expression used by puppeteers are called puppets. No, I don't agree with that. I think that in our description of the world we must use words which are presenting exactly the phenomena which are trying to present, and I can accept that there is a new theater, that there is a multimedia theater, as we have called it, and a new player from multimedia theater may use different means of expression, you know, may use puppets, objects, dolls, may use their own body or present themselves as a character. Why not? I agree, but for me, just to have the clear image of the clear picture of the world, it's necessary to see the difference between the puppet and the object. And puppet is a puppet. It's something which is made specially for the theater. And what is very important, it has a special construction to enable the movement of the figure.
Well, I was thinking of the example I just saw in Prague of Buchtier, who, and by their own definition, they try to make it as much a puppet theater as possible. However, they don't use things like projections. They don't use they sometimes will have the actor on the side, but the actor is less a part of it than them behind performing the puppet theater. But they will use odd things that wouldn't necessarily be found in a traditional show. During a Sherlock Holmes story, at one point somebody was supposed to take the train, and a little electric train comes out and goes around the set. At another point, they had multiple little sets, and they had actually they started off with this little puppet comes out, drinks a bit, falls back on a little bed, and then the next stage below it is his dream. The rest of the show is going to be his dream. This puppet occasionally moves, but the rest of the show is his dream. All sorts of things happen. They use non-traditional backdrops like rusting iron that looks like part of some old machine, although that's not moving, that's just scenery. But they do things like, say, a puppet. They purposely have used filmic sort of editing, so that they have a puppet who hands another puppet a gun, but then in another box below it you'll see human hands passing a gun to another person for just a moment, and then you'll go back to the puppets. So what's going on here? Their intention is to be a puppet theater, and I understand there's, it's hard to cut these things into a certain piece, but at the same time, it seems that they've expanded the grammar, but they've kept, everything is basically happening with little puppets made for the stage, as opposed to, they're not doing it the way, say, Drac Theater has been doing it, with big people on the stage with the occasional puppets. So what do you think of something like that?
Oh, well, I think that everything what's going on in Buchti and Lotki and other companies like that, it's typical for our time. Certainly you have heard about John Barth. John Barth is an American writer and very important. very important because of his declaration that we are in the new period of our culture. It means that our culture came to the end, is exhausted. He spoke about exhausted form of literature. There is no the novel, there is the anti-novel, there is no the classical Shakespeare. There is a kind of collage on Shakespeare. So everything was under the influence of entropy, exhaustion, entropy. They are the words which are explaining our situation. We feel that everything was said already. We have seen several times Shakespeare, we know Shakespeare, we want the new Shakespeare. That's why we are cutting Shakespeare on pieces and putting the new whole of it. And it's going on like that through all the form of arts. At the beginning it was started in the painting, where you have portraits, but afterwards there was some deformation of the portraits, and there was some people forget about the portrait. They are trying to show the movement of the matter. You know, it's abstract. Abstract painting is coming to the game. So it is a problem of our culture in general, that we have lost our confidence in our culture, and we are trying to find the new response, but using the old elements. That's why collage is so popular. That's why Buchti and Lotki are changing how should I put it? Changing dimension of the character. At one point the character is a big one, and another point is a small puppet. It's like using the film technique, you know, when you see the whole and when you see the detail. So all of it, it's a big mixture of the means of expression and also the technique, you know, of presentation. And I'm not surprised that it's going like that, but only thing which I demand from the new theater, it is to be clear, to have the message, for me, important message, the best, some discovery, new thing for me, I mean new observation of the word, and to be clear in presenting this message, because very often it happened that the richness of the means of expression and the richness of the technique applied is so big that finally we are lost in the show. We don't understand it, and we really didn't know what the artist wanted to transmit to us. This is the problem, you know. But on the other hand, it's our culture of our time. What can we do about it? We are living in the period which is called postmodernism. And if in the old time, you know, the speaking subject, creative subject, was always outside its work, nowadays it is inside the work. So I mean, just to give an example, that in the old time the writer was the narrator, and it was always outside the story. nowadays he's inside the story, you know, speaking about the story, about his memories, about himself, and so on. It's a big mixture in the way of narration, you know. So it's our time.
I understand, and it strikes me one of the I really love from a technical and just emotional point of view. I really like, say, what Buk Dialogi is doing, but I would say if there's one defect, it's that it's very hard for them to communicate without irony.
Oh well, this is a national problem, I would say, and I think that in this part of the world, Central Europe, after we have this experience with communism, we can't speak otherwise, you know. We have always a double meaning, you know, and so irony is one of the elements which appear very often, you know. It's very difficult to be one tone speaker, you know. We must have this chance, you know, just to give the underground message, you know, and very often it's irony. And Bukti and Lautki, they are famous for that.
Okay, let's go a different direction here, which will lead us back here. But what do we know about Greek and Roman puppetry? What kind of evidence do we have for what they did?
Well, we haven't much. We haven't much. Greek. Well, we have some figures, you know, just dig out by the anthropolog, and well, and we have this small figure of clay with terracotta, with some wire in the head, and so we are thinking that they were used to perform. And we have the literary evidence about the puppet used during the feasts, but in very special way, puppets which were as it was a case of a skeleton which was apt to take different poses, and presenting this skeleton, Petronius was delivering his poem on the life and death, and how unhappy is man that life is going so quickly, and so on. So we haven't much many evidences, no. It's rather we imagine that this what we have in the primary culture, like the African or Indian culture, that this was something which is representative for the period of childhood of humanity, as I called it. We haven't much from Greek and Roman theater. At the moment I can't give you more evidences, but I remember that I wrote about all of it in my history of puppet theater in Europe.
Is there any connection that anybody knows between? Is there any evidence between the kind of commedia dell'arte figures that show up much later, and the ancient world.
Well, so it's what is very important was use of the masks. You know, it was use of the mask in the Greek theater, very important, and we can imagine that this was a presentation of gods and heroes, and the images were taken from the old sculpture. We can imagine this like that. It's a little bit another line, you know, not puppetry, but another line, but very close. And of course, in the Greek in the Roman time, we had a special comedy which was called Atellane. And in the Atellane we have some types, mask types like Marcus and Bacchus, and we believe that this was the model for the future figure of commedia dell'arte. You know, this is connected with the figure of jester. You know, full jester. It was very important figure through all our culture up to our days, because fool and jester, they were a sort of figure touched by God, and so they were allowed to get in contact with the God. Very often this figure were the scapegoats. You know, they could speak with God, and they received all the blessing and also all the punishment instead of whole the nation, instead of whole the tribe. So the importance of this figure in the primary culture was very important. And later on also, it is we have this information that the big emperor, they like very much to have a fool who was used to say the truth to the emperor. You know, the other officer of the court was afraid to say the truth. They wanted to satisfy the emperor, but the fool just was called like that, the fool, because he was not really clever, and he spoke the truth to the emperor. So Nasreddin, for example, and there was many other like that. And it is this tradition which came up to the commedia dell'arte, and the Zani figure are sort of the full figure. But well, still in Renaissance time, we had the figure of the jester at the almost all court, Renaissance court, and we in Poland in the 16th century we had the very famous fool called Stańczyk, and he, even nowadays, he has some respect among the people. Stańczyk was the one who wanted to have the big and powerful Poland, and he acted in this direction, influencing our king, you know. So it's a little bit exaggerated, but anyway, this is the story of the fool. Nowadays, it's maybe not necessary. You have the media, you have the journalists, and some are lying, some are telling the truth. So we have rather not the fool, but the comical character,
the comedians.
you know. And well, recently it was John Byrne in England, and the other figure as well. Perhaps you remember him, but I have forgotten the name. But well, anyway, this was this line, and it was Marcus, Bacchus, Nasreddin, was Pulcinella, Punch, Polichinelle, Kasperle, and in 19th century, each puppeteer wanted to have his own figure, his own fool, like Chanche, Voltaire in Belgium, Guignol finally,
So it strikes me that this Pulcinello, Punch, Guignol, this figure is a very important figure who changes in every place. How do you see the importance of this figure? Why is this figure so connected with European puppetry? And a little bit about the historical root.
Yes. It's connected with European puppetry, but we are told that some figure in the Chinese puppetry had the same function, and even one of the god of Ramayana, Indonesian puppetry, Semar, was in the function of the fool. So maybe we are not, we haven't well enough studied the other puppetry. Maybe the fool were everywhere. If you think about the American variety show from 19th century and the Negro spiritual performances. So among the Negro spiritual always there was a fool, So it belongs to each culture. I think that we have done a very essential research on European puppetry, but maybe we have neglected this line in the other puppetry. I'm guessing so. I have this feeling. Well, and the figure commedia dell'arte, figure Zanni, the representative of the folk. So it's important to remember that they were the Zanni in the bourgeois society, middle class society. They were people among the rich people, and they were looking for the way to survive, And the puppetry in Europe was for the poor people. Normally, street puppetry, fair place puppetry, So this figure were expressing the point of view of the folk. Yes, so if you think about Punch, he was an anarchist. He was against the marriage, he was against the fatherhood, he was against the police order, he was against the medicine, all the social services. He was ruining the social life because he was so unhappy in himself. There was so many aggression, folk aggression, that he was fighting with the society, and for the street spectators it was a wonderful joy, because he couldn't, such a street passergoer, he couldn't kill his wife, and Punch has done it. He couldn't make order with the children, and Punch had the solution to kill the children, So he couldn't, the normal man couldn't fight the policeman, but Punch could, and it was satisfactory for all these spectators that well, life is difficult, but in theater you can you can make an order with all of them, and this was very popular till the moment when the intellectual came and wanted to use this figure, different combination. If you think about the Polichinelle in the fairground French theater at the beginning of 18th century, Polichinelle was used in the fight against the theater monopoly. It wasn't the social protest like in the case of Punch. Polichinelle was involved in the theatrical quarrel, you know, against the theater monopoly. So the use of this figure was very different. And Kasperle was the very let us say normal youngster with the certain aptitude to find his own way in the life, but he was not bad. He was not anarchist, you know. He was rather a peaceful figure with some spirit, you know, to solve the question. It was quite different. However, we had Laszlo Vitez figure in Hungary, and Laszlo Vitez figure was very aggressive as well. He was exploited. He was exploited by the owner of the mill, and he was exploited by devils. And so he was fighting devils in the most attractive way. Wonderful. He was such a master in the puppetry of Henryk Jurkowski. It's Hungarian puppeteer. It's absolutely fantastic. He killed, let us say, 6 devils, and each devil he killed in different way, you know. So it was very, from the theatrical point of view, it was very attractive. Again, another function. And if you take Petrushka, Petrushka was in this hostile society situation. He must find his own way to live, and he was trying to fight his enemy, and his enemy was a doctor, was gypsy, was the Orthodox priest. So finally he was trying to be married. You know, one of his target was to be married, and it was a problem at that time. It was necessary to have some money to arrange marriage, and so he was fighting with the world. So the really fighting figures, they were Petrushka and Punch. The other, Laszlo Vitez, Hungarian one, but Kasperle was not so much.
Kasperle?
Kasperle.
No, but what about
Kasperle? Kasperle was the same as the German one.
Okay.
Yes. He was not a fighter. He was just, you know, a small intrigant, you know. It's a very, sometimes very noble figure, but just all the time waiting, you know, with the wits, you know, solving problems with his wits. It was Kasperle. And Guignol, 19th century creature, it was rather a sad figure, sad because it was a conformist. He, in this capitalist surrounding, he was trying to arrange his things with his wits, just with his wits, but he was not fortunate all the time. Sometimes he was misogyn, you know, sometimes the problem with his wife, you know. Sometimes he was fighting the owner of his house, of his lodging, yes. But finally he was not a victor. No, he was a sort of compromise. Chanche was commenting this story, you know. It was another function, another situation. So you see how many functions it was given to them. Also, all of them were very famous. And then there come the 20th century, and in 20th century these popular figures were used by the totalitarian system. Maybe you don't know about it, that there was revolutionary Kasperle, who was representing the communist point of view, and there was the revolutionary Petrushka, who was fighting the capitalists, and they were used by propaganda leader, you know, and they were quite popular in their time, and there was the Red Army Petrushka, for example, you know, for the soldiers, and there was agriculture Petrushka, just voting for the collective agriculture, you know, and so on. The use for propaganda was very, very strong, and after the Second World War, some people try to revive this figure, and for a certain period of time it was okay. Czech with Kasperle, and the German with Kasperle, and Punchant Judy as well. But slowly these figures are disappearing.
Yeah, or it seems that they've become, I've seen a few shows and they seem to become very much softened, but for children. And
yes, it's one point, and another point is that there is a new system of education. If Punch and Judy could visit the children party in 19th century and beginning of 20th century, nowadays it is impossible. My friends told me, Punchmen told me, that they are not allowed to go to the school nowadays, and the educational authority are fighting the Punch and Judy shows, you know.
In Alaska, the most trouble I ever got was adding Punch to one of our sideshows, because he killed the baby, he killed the wife, you know, and that was like,
Yes, I do understand this position, but on the other hand, it's a pity, because this tradition was so theatrical, and besides, it's expressed a certain social situation. Now the situation is changed.
yes. Well, I think also Punch is probably one of the most extreme characters that's ever been invented, the English version.
Yes.
And it's strange, because everything he does seems completely evil, yet somehow he doesn't seem evil. And I think part of it, the reason is what you said.
Yes. Oh, even if it's evil, it's a sort of abstract evil. He is sympathetic as evil.
Yes, it's a very strange character. They even tried to make a horror film out of him. I didn't see it. I'm kind of leery of seeing it, but I may break down and see it at some point, just because I like horror films. But so the other traditions in Europe, I know that marionettes were very important, and I'm guessing the marionette tradition comes. Well, of course, marionettes go back to India. They, you know, it seems like they made their way across, which brings us back to the question. Some people say India is the birth of puppetry. And then I think maybe we could say there's spontaneous puppetry everywhere. What do you think about that before we go back to the European?
Yes, just it's a simple thing to hang the puppet on the string, you know, different kind of string, because you can have the strong what do you call it, like
rod?
a stick.
Yeah.
Rod.
Yes.
You can have a rod, and you can have several strings, you know, and it's very easy to construct, and it was popular all over the world. Even I saw some African which were using the marionette. As a matter of fact, I must tell you that I'm not very much interested in the history of the technique. No. I know that this was a very special technique used in variety show, you know, all over Europe, and in America variety show was very popular. And with the string puppet you may astonish the people, you know. It's how it is possible to make this just with the several string, and this figure is able to do so many things. And besides, in the 19th century there were this sort of trick marionettes, this one which could transform in another figure, you know. So it was a big attraction, and here at the continent in Europe there was the tradition to give the show, to present the story with the marionette, and at the end of the show to present the trick marionettes, you know, like something additional, you know, a cake at the end of the show, a special cake and tasty one with this figure that the dancing girl is transforming into the balloon or something like that. So this was very popular, and of course there was also the solo player with the marionette. So let us speak about Roser, who did the marionette program after the Second World War with very refined puppets, and his manipulation was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And he had a clown, Gustav, who was playing piano, and it was a wonderful item. And he, Roser Albrecht, know how to project life on the puppet. In his hand, it seems that the puppet was conversing with the player, you know, that there was a relationship, the sentimental relationship. He played it in the most wonderful. And there was this British tradition, Lancaster marionette, and they used to play very famous opera, Horatio Vecchio, for example, for the Renaissance time, in very beautiful way. As well, they were connected with the Bernard show, and they made Bernard Shaw wrote a play for them, Show versus Cake or something like that, and he attended the show. It was a very nice story around it. And there was Christopher Lee, who used the marionettes as well. Big tradition, English tradition. It was quite popular. Chenet, for example, in Jacques Chenet in France, he had the puppet marionette variety show using some images from avant-garde painting, you know. So it was special, and of course this tradition of Kasperle and Hurwinek in Czechoslovakia, Skupa theater. So this was a very nice, rich tradition. But you know, when you think about Vittorio Podrecca, the idea was to use marionette as executors of the music. The background was the music, beautiful music, and the puppets were replacing the actors. The same was with a splendid Salzburg marionette theater. Also, they performed Mozart, you know. So, well, it was like a reproduction of the live variety show or the live music show. Well, if you think about Skupa, there was another story. This was based on the dialogue, on very clever dialogue. There was two figures, Kasperle and Hurwinek, and Kasperle was the father. Hurwinek was a child, very intelligent child, who asked his father very difficult questions, you know. And this was the source of the humor of the show. But it was also the variety show items as well. But you know, besides some elements which were speaking about the nature of the puppet, I didn't really appreciate very much the marionette shows, because they were rather passive. But what was so impressive, it was Boerewinkel, the Dutch player. It was Philippe Gentil as well, who played this tune. It was to show the marionette life. For example, Pierrot. Philippe Gentil entered this scene with his Pierrot. Pierrot is marionette, and Pierrot is walking fine. But suddenly, Pierrot is noticing that somebody is directing him. He noticed his string, so he is fighting with the string. He is destroying this string, and finally he is dead. You know, and this is one version. But Boerewinkel did another thing. He had a Pulcinella who was fighting the string, and finally he was dead, and the marionette player was dead. But after a while, Pulcinella was alive as a stick puppet. You see the idea, you know, and it was fine. And this element, you know, this motive, I liked very much, and this was the only thing you can do with puppets, with marionette. With other puppets, you can't do this thing. To show the awareness of the puppet. I am the puppet, and I'm protesting against it. It's a nice motive, nice story.
we were talking before yesterday about the traveling puppets who were doing Shakespeare and other plays, and they came through Eastern Europe. Eventually, the traveling puppet show, or eventually there started to be theaters just for puppets. Maybe you can explain a little bit about those early puppet theaters and how the puppet theater tradition, places like the Tone Marionette Theater, which still exists, and other puppet theaters, were those, and how were those different? Well, obviously in size, they were different from the Actors Theater, but in other ways were they different? So maybe comment a little bit about the theater itself.
Oh, sure. Well, it's it's a big subject, you know. It's
Yes.
a big subject, and well, the big traveling theater were born as copies of the drama theater. Nowadays you have television. There was a time when theater were existing only in big city. For example, there was the theater in Paris, and to see the theater, it was for the people in the province, it was very rare. It was very difficult. It was necessary to come to Paris, and some people thought, let us make a copy of the Paris theater and go around the country. And it was in the end of 18th century, beginning of 19th century, when the melodrama was popular, Pixerecourt, Kotzebue, people like that. And the most important melodrama was produced in Saint Martin Theatre in Paris, and so the puppet player who made the copy of the show, and they used the special card, you know, to take from the theater from one place to another. An installation of the theater was very long process, like a circus, you know, to install the circus, you know, in a place for the guest performances. It was a long process. It was same with this theater, but at the poster there was always the remark, it is done after the performances in St. Martin Theatre, to give the audience the satisfaction that they are seeing something from Paris, you know. So it was this tradition, but maybe most developed in France and Germany, you know. And of course they used the marionette because it was most apt for the melodrama, and well, the imitation of human being was the best in this way. If you think about it, that there was the artificial light and not very bright, you know, to hide the string was very easy at that time. So they were pretending that they are human in miniature, you know, presenting the show. Anyway, it was such a illusion, such an impression. So mainly such theater existed in Germany and in France. Little by little, the other theater appeared with the musical program, and also with variety shows. And well, this traveling tradition is lasting up to now. And You have the puppet theater, which are traveling from festival to festival. If you remember about this, that we have in Poland as much puppetry festival as we have the theater. So we have a year, we have about 20 puppet festival. So in the whole world there is a lot of it. If you start in January, you can go through all festival the year long, you know. So some puppeteers nowadays are playing at the festivals, you know. So if you have the permanent theater, you are obliged to change the repertoire. When you are traveler, you have one show and you can present it 100, 200, 300 times. You don't need to change it. For example, Roser didn't change much his first presentation, and he told me that he is not bored with that. It's everything is okay, because this is the audience which make also the performance, and in front of new audience he is presenting as a new show. It's a new test for him, just to work like that. So you have this two type of theater: travelers, mainly the Western puppeteer are travelers, and the Eastern, I mean Eastern Europe, they are the permanent theater, because they were given this wonderful theater and some subvention for producing the new shows and so on. So we have here in this part of Europe, we have the repertoire theater, and in the Western countries there are the travelers, and of course there are different form of traveling puppeteers.
To switch to shadow puppets, which seems to me a very different kind of puppetry. They were called Chinese shadows, or ombre chinoise, or something like that. Did they really come from China, or I know that the Turks have shadow puppets, or how did shadow puppets enter the European repertoire?
Oh well, it was in 18th century. There was this ombre chinoise appeared, and as a matter of fact, the name was taken from Asia, but the theater of Seraphine, it was a theater lacking the color, and it was the theater of silhouette. Invention was to present the shadow on the screen, but it has nothing to do with the ombre chinoise, which were quite different, traditional and full of color. But of course you are right that there was many different kind of shadow theater, and there was the Turkish Karages, and there was the Greek Karagiosis, and before that we had a wonderful, it was I think 13th century, we had the puppet shadow theater in Egypt. It was fantastic puppetry. It's ornamental one, beautiful figures. Some of them were preserved, and we have some picture of some illustration of them. Very, very beautiful from Egypt. and well, and there was this Seraphim theater, but also we had the new technique, which was the Chat Noir, the Black Cat cabaret shadow theater, but in fact it wasn't a shadow theater, it was the theater of narration.
I want to know a bit more about that period at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, where people in the art world or the artistic theater, or people like Craig, or maybe Michel de Gelderode, or someone, those kinds of people, the modern artists, began to discover puppetry, or the use of the puppet.
Oh well, it's a special story. You need to write a book on it. The interest for puppetry started in the middle of 19th century. It was this George Sand writer and the circle of the people, among whom there was also Frédéric Chopin, who were interested in puppetry in the castle of Nohant. But later on, there was the period of some being bored, of some boredness because of the naturalistic theater. So the story of the theater 19th century is that it started with melodrama. Later on there was some period of the theater stars, actors, very famous actors, and they were dominating in the theater. Next was the naturalistic, realistic naturalistic theater, and some artists were born with that. They were not accepting it. They wanted to avoid a kind of commercialization of the theater and to come back to creation and to come back to the poetry. And at the beginning it was some poets in France that started the new theater. There was this cabaret Chat Noir, but there was also Aurélien Lunier-Pot, who created the Theatre Èvre, and there was also some other theatre, and was the little theatre, so-called little theatre, puppet theatre, created by the poet Signoret, Henri Signoret. And this was very significant because Signoret wanted to have this spoken theater, beautifully spoken theater. He engaged for this theater the poet who could understand the text, express the text according to the thought of the author, and they used puppets which were only signs, symbols of the character. They really didn't act much, only a little, a small gesture, to emphasize the meaning of the text, and maybe it was just the start. And next we had this big changes in the painting. There was this exhibition of the Impressionists and a new wave of artistic project arrived in Paris, and there was a quite new atmosphere. and all of a sudden, well, and whom should I mention here? Because from one side we had this poetic approach to the subject, and on the other side we have the grotesque development of the grotesque, and this was Alfred Jarry with his series of Ubu presentation, and Lumière Paul has produced the first Ubu presentation, and of course it was a great scandal, and the show was not continued, and Jarry looked for some realization in the puppet theater. He associated with the puppet theater to have this production. And on the other side of the canal, there was Gordon Craig, who was man of some refined culture, with some talent for drawing, for director work. He got some new idea of the theater, and even he produced some shows which were based on the old court customs, English customs. It was the masks. It was called the mask. This was the spectacle from the 17th century called court entertainment, and it was rather allegoric presentation, and Craig wanted to exploit some images. So it was again the escape from the naturalistic theater into the theater of Baroque, allegoric theater, theatrical, you know, theatricality. It was just the world which was describing the research of Craig. And Craig was the figure by itself. He produced some other shows with a great success, and finally he was invited to Moscow to produce the Macbeth story, Shakespeare, and he did it using the metaphoric means of expression. So his project was as a visual metaphor. For example, the presentation of the court was imagined in this way, that there was a staircase, at the higher point there was a king in the golden cloak, and this clock went down to the stage, to the floor of the stage, covering all the background, you know. And on the staircase were sitting the court people, having his head in the cloak of the king, you know. So it was like a pyramid of kingdom. And so it was this way he wanted to see the theater, just turning toward the metaphoric theater. And at the same time he was writing some deliberation on the theater, and at that time also he thought a little bit earlier, he thought about the not marionette, Iber marionette. And this caused a lot of discussion, because some people thought that he wanted to throw away the actor, replace actor by the marionette, but in fact he was looking for the ideal actor, and that's why he imagined that it should be somebody who will follow the wish of the artist. He offered to us the notion of the artist of the theater. Artist of the theater is somebody who is responsible for the show. So it's like authorship. You know, it's not the actor who is responsible for the show. It is the will of one artist. This was very important. Artist of the theater, it was this notion. And he wanted all the actors to act according to the wish of the author. That's why he invented as a metaphor this Iber marionette notion. But he was also interested in the multimedia theater. He imagined that he might put on the stage an actor, Iber marionette, all together in one show. If we have this multimedia theater, we are forgetting very often that it was the idea of the Edward Gordon Craig. It was his idea. At the same time, he started to imagine his own puppet theater, and he wrote motions for the puppet shows, and he produced two magazines. One is very famous, it's called The Mask. Another one is less famous and called The Marionette. And in The Marionette he has published his small motion for the marionette. Altogether he published, I think, about 7 or 8. But as I have mentioned to you, and I show you the books, there are plenty of them which were recently published by the Institute in Charleville. And he wanted very much to exploit this line of his imagination, but it didn't happen. He was very difficult as a man, as a director. He wanted to be really the artist of the theater, and the director of the theater, the other director of the theater, didn't agree with him, and that's why he found in France the place where he lived to his last days, just deliberating on theater, but not really doing much. The most important work of his, it is this Moscow Macbeth in the Stanislavski theater, and of course the big heritage, it is his thought about multimedia theater, Iber marionette, and the motion for the puppet show. The other artists were very much interested as well in puppetry, especially that they were on the research of this theatrical theater, and the big influence had this appearance of Russian ballets of Diaghilev in Paris, and with colorful scenography and wonderful dancing, and under this influence of this theater, the other artists just go in the direction of new fine art. For example, Léger did also some theater project, and even Picasso did some project for the theater in the famous show Parade with Satie. And he used the big figure. It's sort of big puppet mannequin or puppet figure. So this avant-garde was very open to this direction. They were interested very much in the fine art used in the theater, and of course fine art of that theater was going into the abstract direction, so there was not imitation of the reality but some abstract picture, some constructivism, like in Malevich work, Kazimir Malevich work in Moscow, and there was as well some puppet theater of that time. For example, there was the Sofia Słonimska from Petersburg, who did the puppet theater, reconstructing the old fairground French theater. She did it with great artists, fine artists like Goncharova and the other. And during the revolution she escaped to Paris, and she continued there with some puppetry, experimental puppetry in the 20s. But it was a short period of time. So, again, I can say that I have described all of it in my book. It is available, and there was some other publication on this subject as well, especially that at that time the so-called performance art started next to the theater, and all of it is presented with a good documentation in picture. Maybe among these avant-gardists it's necessary to mention Kokoschka, who did several shows with the puppet, like Stroman. Just a moment, it's Sphinx and Stroman. He did it with puppet. It was an experimental show, and so such shows, such experiments were made almost by the all ambitious artists. So among the puppeteers of that time, real puppeteers, maybe it's necessary to mention Paul Byrne from Munich. Paul Byrne was the man who was working together with Reinhardt, the very famous German director, and Byrne was not satisfied with this heterogeneous character of the drama theater, that there was live actor and artificial scenery, and he wanted to have the homogeneous theater, and so he decided to make puppet theater. And he organized at the beginning of 20th century, he organized a meeting, the first artistic puppet theater with the participation of real artists, and he did a beautiful things. For example, when he did the show, the Nuremberg puppet, it was a kind of the ballet. He ordered especially a puppet of porcelain, and the puppet moved as a character and as well as a porcelain. It was a beautiful idea, to have the movement of the material. And Paul Byrne had a big influence in Europe on the puppetry in Poland, in Yugoslavia, and in Hungary. It was one of the most important artistic theater at that time. He was Jew, and so during the Nazi time he was obliged to emigrate, and he spent his time in England as emigrant. Well,
so I'm running out of time here on this. Not personally running out of time, but the machine is, and we are slaves to this machine right now. Do you have any, just final thoughts or conclusions about puppetry? Maybe you don't, it doesn't matter, you said quite a bit, but if you have any other thoughts you'd like to, maybe something that from yesterday that you said, boy, I should have said this, or anything.
Well, I think that you and me, we are touching a very beautiful branch of art. It's not only the branch of art, it's a branch of our culture, very, very important, and we are lucky people. I believe it's a beautiful part of our life. Maybe it's not very much recognized by the art critic, but this is important because it touches the very, very important impulses, needs of the human being to create, and in the puppet theater, in the actor theater, there is a sort of imitation. It's very difficult to say about creation. It's ephemeral. In puppetry, it's more of creation because you are starting from the very beginning. Of course, I am speaking about the real puppetry, not this kind of theater of object and performance which is so popular nowadays. But I believe in real puppetry.
Well, there you have it. That's my second interview with Henryk Jurkowski, which I did in 2012 at his home in Warsaw, Poland. And there might be a third one of these I do, because I do have some material, at least an hour's worth of material that was not filmed but was recorded, and I might figure out a way to make that somewhat visual. Well, thank you. If you feel like supporting this project and this channel, feel free to. There is a PayPal link below, and I can certainly use the help. Also, do subscribe, if you haven't yet, to the channel, and you can hit like. I guess that helps the blind idiot gods of the algorithms, so why don't you do that? Meanwhile, for those of you who appreciate puppetry and what it means as an art form, well, I wish you well. And those of you who don't get it yet, keep watching. You will. Look at other videos on the channel. You'll get it. Thanks for coming by.
Popelem vám skalím hlavy, bude konec vaší slávy!